Welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Colors of Prog, the YouTube channel where I discuss prog recordings from all around the world. I always thank you for your support and for watching this, and proud to say we now have well over 100 subscribers, and that is appreciated as well as quite a few views for those who did not subscribe. So this is a Asian-centric program, this one here. So it's going to incorporate some information about Philippines and Japan. So we'll start with Joey Smith, also known as Joseph Smith and Pepe Smith, was born in the Philippines in 1947 to an American serviceman and a Filipino native. And at an early age, he learned the drums and then guitar and bass. His band, the Surfers, got a 6-month gig in Vietnam and returned to the Philippines as the lead singer and drummer for a band called the Downbeats. There's a connection here. So he was called the Mick Jagger of the Philippines for his looks and stage antics. He often imitated Jagger in live performance. The Downbeats actually opened for the Beatles when they played Manila in 1966, one of the Beatles' last worldwide tours. Joey Smith then moved to the UK along with Mike Hanopol, a bass player and guitarist, and they began to do session work in the UK. It's rumored that they assisted on early Quatermass recordings and some Coliseum material when the band members could not appear in the studio not in the studio. So Joey and Mike then moved to Japan, where the story gets really interesting. Hiro Yanagida in Japan had been a member of a Japanese improvisational psychedelic rock band, April Fool. And Hiro had also played in Food Brain, which is another heavy psychedelic rock band. Milk Time and Nanasai no Wuhin Tengoku from 70 to 71, respectively. And the second one, Nanasai, translates to English as Elderly Person Heaven for 7 years. So heavy. They're two of his earliest solo albums, very psychedelic and bluesy, and the second album has more touches of prog. So where does Joey Smith come into all this? And here are the compilation of the Hiro Yanagida Milk Time and the other one. So Joey Smith appeared on these albums as a singer, credited, as a drummer, uncredited. Very interesting. This is really some crazy stuff. It's psychedelic, bluesy, eccentric, and occasionally has touches of prog, especially Milk Time. Now, moving on from there, Joey Smith and Mike Hanopol joined eccentric Japanese space rock artist Shinki. True. And they were in a band called Speed, Glue, and Shinki. Speed was allegedly Smith's nickname, and bass player Masayoshi Kobe was Glue. Due to the proclivities for the interest in drug use. Speed of all sorts of form, heroin, everything it's popular worldwide in the early 1970s, late 60s and beyond. And this crazy album was one where two Filipino joined a couple of Japanese guys and they just created a mind-blowing record. Now, Mike Hanopol is not actually credited for much on this, but I found out that Mike Hanopol had actually done a lot of the writing of the lyrics with Joey Smith, which was interesting, who sang and played drums. And there's a long, very heavy prog suite on this thing called Sun, Planet, Life, Moon, and Song for an Angel. And it's pretty wild, and it's very proggy. And it's unknown to many Westerners. Some Europeans know this, and it's a hardcore underground thing even for Japanese people. But more and more people, as they stretch out their tethers for the interest in prog rock from around the world, are finding, whoa, there's some early Japanese stuff going on there. So, as I said, the suite was very good. The Sun, Planets, Life, Moon, and Song for an Angel. And they could have done so much more with this kind of sound. Unfortunately, the record did not sell. So Joey Smith and Mike returned to the Philippines together. They hooked up with the guitarist and singer Wally Gonzalez for the Juan de la Cruz Band. Well known in historic Filipino circles as one of the great blues rock, psychedelic blues rock bands of the Philippines. Wally Gonzalez had all three of these guys had a long career. There is no Juan de la Cruz. It was only a trio of Mike Hanopol, Joey Smith, and Wally Gonzalez. And as far as I can ascertain, Juan de la Cruz is like a Joe Smith. Manny Gonzalez is like a made-up name of an ordinary, average person. So in the Philippines, Juan de la Cruz is like an average, everyday person. Wally Gonzalez was in a 1971 incarnation of a band that was a power rock trio. They had a cream-like sound. And so it only goes to show that Mascara, the 1974 album featuring this trio, considered one of their best albums. And it's quite good. It's a combination of lyrics in English and Tagalog. And as you can see, Joey Smith here with the obligatory cigarette hanging from the mouth. It's a crazy album. Very good. It's very good. It has this psychedelic bluesy kind of thing going on here, and there's some songs that are almost ballads, but they also have a bit of a prog feel. Very interesting that the guys would do this, and I found it really interesting. So Wally Gonzalez was a much-loved figure in Pinoy rock, but there were issues within the Juan de la Cruz band. So when the band would splinter, fall apart, Joey, a.k.a. Pepe Smith, would leave, come back. Mike Hanopol had his own life as a recording artist. He too would leave, come back, rejoin, whatever. And so one of the few times Wally Gonzalez recorded without Joey Smith and Mike Hanopol as Juan de la Cruz. He had a few albums, but not too many. We did this Wally on the Road thing, which is really interesting because this is still playing around with that blues rock bass, but it has some really interesting prog material that he must have picked up from Joey Smith, the interest in progressive rock. So Wally on the Road, and by the way, these two recordings came from the Philippines. They're actually not that easy to find. And because they're older recordings, younger people in the Philippines tend to like different kind of music nowadays, more popular sounds of today. So trying to find something that went back a couple of decades was really interesting. So Gonzalez and Smith and Hanopol over the years reunited, or part reunited. There was a infamous reunion show at Pasay City in the Philippines in 2005. Gonzalez died July 2021 due to complications due to contracting COVID. Joey Smith and his need for speed, the drug, led to a meth addiction called shabu in the Philippines. And he was imprisoned in Quezon City for nearly 2 years, I believe. Upon his release, before Gonzalez passed away, there were a couple of reunions for the Juan de la Cruz band, and Joey Smith actually recorded his one and only CD as a solo artist, I believe in 2005. Smith died in 2019. Mike Hanopol, the only still living member of the Juan de la Cruz band, has had a long solo career, and interestingly enough, he lived in New York City in the United States for decades, where he was known as the Messianic Rabbi. He embraced the Judaism religion. A lot of his recordings incorporate elements of the Bible and then the Jewish religion. But his music really evolved from prog to blues rock to jazz rock and fusion. And Mike Hanopol is now about 76 years old. He's really become a well-respected musician internationally. Even Joe Satriani became a fan of his. Mike Hanopol too was diagnosed with COVID in June 2021, but I believe he's still with us. Which then brings me to Ars Nova. Let's go back to Japan. If you're an ELP fan, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or a big Goblin fan and are into amazing bass players interacting with keyboard players, this is the band for you. Also, let's add in a touch of goth darkness, Gothic. Ars Nova was formed in 1983 by Kyoko Kanazawa on bass, Kieko Tsubata on keyboards, and Yumiko Sato on drums. By 1991, Kieko Kumaagi was the keyboardist, and by 1993, Akiko Takahari was the drummer. Takahashi, sorry, Akiko. Transy was their second album, brought them much acclaim, and that was in 1994. They even played Prog Fest in 1995 in America. This is how quickly they evolved from a all-female and all-instrumental Japanese band devoted to the music of ELP and Goblin, but doing their own material, that within a few years, they're playing a Prague festival in America. Goddess in Darkness from 1996 cemented their crazy mix of sounds, and they started to include more Italian influences like PFM and some bongo, while still remaining an instrumental band. So by 1998's Book of the Dead, and I kid you not, it is called Book of the Dead. The band was reduced to a duo of only Kieko on keyboards and Akiko on drums, with the first male addition to the band, Ken Ishita, on bass, but he was just a guest musician. What we have here are some very, as before, dark ELP Goblin mixture with some additional Middle Eastern sounds. And here's what the band members looked like on the time of the recording of Book of the Dead. Android Tamina, released in 2001, also added Miki Nakajima as an insanely talented second keyboardist. And for the first time, there were vocals on one track credited to Laura Reina and a numero uno, whom I suspect to be either Akiko or the featured main keyboardist. The ladies really liked playing on the maybe sexually androgynous or not thing when they were promoting this album. As you can see, they really hooked on with that goth leather metal thing. I'm sure people really into the band had their posters up somewhere. Some more of that crazy promotion there. And you know, Ars Nova, there were several bands called Ars Nova. Actually, there's two other prog related bands called Ars Nova, but for the Japanese one, they're pretty crazy. I cannot even strengthen again what, in my opinion, is such a similar sound to Goblin with crazily talented musicians. Akiko was no slouch on the drums, and Kyoko and Mika on the keyboard. They would actually tour as a trio, and I'll get to that in a minute, in the United States and elsewhere. So jettisoning all extra musicians on stage, they just went out there as a trio and they played this really thick, dark music. You guys should really check this stuff out. So, Biogenesis Project. What did he say? Yes, Biogenesis Project. I believe it's 2010. This looks like a manga DVD, doesn't it? So it's a crazy concept they came up with. It's set in the year 2301, and it's about the overcrowding of the Earth, its ecology problems, and a super biogenetic creature created to deal with this. So amazingly, the core trio of Ars Nova invited Lucio Fabri from PFM, members of Goblin, members of Balletta di Bronzo, the fantastic Italian band who created the YS album, and others to, as well as Arjen Lucassen, the leader of the Dutch metal prog band Aeron, to work on this with them. So for the first time, we actually have vocals on our Ars Nova album, and we actually have a story to follow, and it's pretty bizarre. And there were other associated Japanese people working on this to help fill out the thing. And it's just pretty mind-blowing, terrific. The great stuff here. They recorded a live version of this, which is also on this, pardon me, special edition box. So the CD has the Biogenesis story, and then there are some live tracks on here, and there's a DVD which includes photographs taken during the recording, as well as 4 live tracks that feature some of the band members that are guesting on this album. Biogenesis. Anyway, if you like manga, metal, goth, prog, Goblin, ELP, this strong female musicians, and a really heavy, crazy deep rock and sound. the earlier Ars Nova albums don't even hint at what was coming with this one, which might explain after this that the band kind of fractured for a bit, like most prog bands do over a lengthy amount of time. And so Ars Nova would have different people in it. I believe Akiko left at some point, but I did manage to locate some pretty terrific on the Transy label, which I'm not sure is an official label or not. The trio, as I mentioned earlier. And so we have Ars Nova from around the world. And these shows were from November 2001, July to November. And then we had the Nightmares, where they re-recorded some of the earlier material for yet another world tour. And finally, Grand Bootleg style, on October 31st, there was a special Halloween show that Ars Nova did in America at the Club Crocodile, or Crocodile if it was mistyped, in Austin, Texas. So, yes, as you can see, I really like this band, so I tracked down other recordings from them to see how as a trio they made that sound live. It's really incredible. So, we discussed today Filipino musicians who went to the UK and then to Japan, and the recordings they worked on in Japan, then they went back, had these blues rock, proggy type of works, and then I discussed Ars Nova, which has a big following. Actually, Akiko now has her band that, if you follow her on Facebook, Akiko's Cosmo Space, or Akiko's Cosmic Space, I believe. But there's plenty of Ars Nova video footage from over the years worth checking out. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back soon with yet another Colors of Prog.